Well, welcome to Second Sunday for June 2025. Our Second Sunday programs are made possible by the Friends of Great Swamp, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and by the generous support of the Marta Heflin Foundation. Today, we are delighted to welcome Alice Kratzer and her presentation on cicadas. A mechanical engineer and a graduate of Rochester Institute of Technology, Ali is the founder of Owlfly Engineering and Owlfly Publishing. Owlfly Engineering develops sustainable technologies related to climate change mitigation, both locally and globally. In addition, Ali is an entomologist and in 2022 authored and illustrated the award-winning field guide, The Social Wasp of North America. Last year in 2024, Ali published her second major field guide, The Cicadas of North America. Recently, a highly regarded entomologist reviewed Ali's latest book and stated that her work, quote, sets a new standard for insect field guides and is the most comprehensive field guide to cicadas ever written. So please join me. Let's welcome engineer, entomologist, author, and artist, Alice Kratzer.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. This should be a lot of fun. First of all, can everybody hear me okay? This way? Perfect. Okay, so this presentation will serve as a brief introduction to the world of cicadas to answer the question of why these strange and clumsy bugs are so important to the ecosystems that they inhabit. Before we begin, I want to ask that you please save all questions to the end of the presentation. Thank you. So, as previously stated, my name is Alice Kratzer, though I like to go by Ali. I am an insect scientist and award-winning author of both The Social Wasp of North America and The Cicadas of North America. My first book was released in 2022 and established me as one of the youngest published field guide authors in history. I spent the last 3 years researching and writing about cicadas, which are relatively large and conspicuous insects in the superfamily Cicadavidae. I could make up some elegant philosophical rationale for why I chose to study them, but honestly, I just think they're neat, and I think that you should too. There are about 375 known species of cicadas on the continent. To better understand them, we're going to start off by taking a brief look at the physical features that all cicadas share. These two illustrations show the top and bottom of a cicada's body. The legs are removed below the first joint in the right-hand image, so the body is easier to see. All cicadas have 3 pairs of legs and 2 pairs of wings. Their wings fold back over their body at rest. Sorry about that. There we go. Cicadas have 2 large compound eyes on the sides of their head and 3 simple eyes called ocelli on top. Like all true bugs in the order Hemiptera, cicadas have a long tube-like mouth called a rostrum, which they use exclusively to feed on plant sap. Male cicadas have special organs at the base of their abdomen, which they use to generate audible sounds to attract a mate. Powerful muscles vibrate a small pair of membranes called tymbals in a series of little clicks that string together to create every other sound that a cicada makes. Mechanically, a tymbal works almost the same as the membrane in a little electronic speaker. Almost every species of cicada sings with a unique song, which can help to identify them in the field. Here are some simplified diagrams that show the typical internal anatomy of adult male and female cicadas. A cicada needs huge muscles in its thorax in order to fly. A male cicada has an extra pair of muscles in its abdomen to vibrate the tymbals, but otherwise his abdomen is mostly empty space. It forms a huge resonant chamber to better amplify his song. Some insects are very intelligent animals, but cicadas are not one of them. Cicadas technically can bite, though they never bite people on purpose. If you hold a cicada in your hand for long enough, it might forget where it is and mistake your finger for a tree branch. If it decides to take a sip of what it thinks is plant sap, it will be very, very confused at the taste of blood. Cicada bites are exceedingly rare and do not require medical attention. Cicadas begin their lives as an egg laid in an incision within the stem of a plant. The egg passively absorbs moisture and nutrients from the sap until it's ready to hatch. A tiny rice-sized nymph hatches from the egg falls to the ground below, and begins to feed on small roots underground. The nymph feeds on larger and larger roots over time, shedding its skin as it grows. When it's ready to emerge, the nymph builds a small capped chimney out of mud and waits for nightfall. It climbs up the nearest surface and metamorphosizes into a winged adult. Adult male cicadas attract females with their song, they mate, and the female creates small incisions in the stem of a host plant to begin the cycle anew. Periodical cicadas are famous for their long lifespans and coordinated emergences of almost mythical proportions. They always emerge together after a set number of years, like clockwork. And they are by far the most famous cicadas here in New Jersey. However, periodical cicadas are restricted to the eastern United States and only make up about 2% of all cicada species on the continent. Most cicadas are annual, which means they have a shorter lifespan and simply emerge whenever they are fully grown, which is typically 2 to 4 years. Still, other cicadas are synchronous, which is somewhere in the middle and still very new to science. Synchronous cicadas emerge all at once, like periodical cicadas do, but they don't wait a set number of years to do it, which makes their cycles much more difficult to predict. In 2018, entomologists Will Chatfield Taylor and Jeffrey Cole figured out that synchronous cicadas need a cumulative threshold of rainfall in order to mature, which partially explains their strange emergence cycles. Synchronous cicadas are most common in arid regions of the American West. Cicadas are an incredibly understudied group of organisms, so to this day, the emergence cycles of many species have never been studied at all. When a female cicada creates incisions in a plant to lay her eggs, the branch will die back and droop in a process called flagging. Flagging is mostly aesthetic damage and rarely causes any long-term harm to the host plant. Still, it can inhibit the growth of young trees, so some farmers and landscapers may seek to prevent it. Applying agricultural netting to the plants during the cicada's flight season is currently accepted as the most effective way to prevent damage. Pesticide treatments are generally not effective against cicadas, since other cicadas in the area will just fly back in to replace the ones that were killed. It is important to note that there are no cicada-specific pesticides. So despite what marketing may imply, any pesticide that kills cicadas will kill beneficial insects right alongside them. Many generalized pesticides are long-lived and may persist in the environment for years, which can wipe out beneficial predatory insects and make future pest outbreaks much worse. Generalized pesticides should be used carefully and sparingly in agriculture and should almost never be used in residential landscaping. So cicadas feed on plant sap, but that isn't all bad news for the plants that they feed on. In exchange for a dependable source of food, cicada nymphs provide aeration and water routing for the plant's roots via a simple network of tunnels. Cicadas and their host plants have evolved together over millions of years into what is usually a symbiotic relationship. But that's just one side of the food web. Let's take a step back and look at the wider picture of how cicadas fit into our broader ecosystems. At the bottom of the food chain, cicadas eat native plants. After that, nearly everything else eats cicadas. Cicadas are large, completely defenseless, and periodically announce their location by calling out to a hungry world. Almost everything loves to eat them, which makes cicadas a crucial food source in every ecosystem they inhabit. Cicadas are an important source of food for songbirds, mammals, reptiles, and even other invertebrates like wasps and spiders. Cicadas are hunted underground by moles and snakes, and in the sky by bats and dragonflies. So, to recap, when cicadas are plentiful, animal life feasts and flourishes. And when they go missing, animal life suffers as a result. Now, Some of you may have heard that I identified 21 undescribed species of cicadas that are completely new to science. The truth is that I did that entirely by accident. I am one of only a handful of scientists who have ever attempted to catalog these insects, so I was bound to run into a few new species along the way. Most of the undescribed species are from Mexico. I was able to identify these species as new to science by carefully reviewing literature from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, visiting museum collections to examine specimens, and providing remote assistance to community scientists and photographers around the world. By process of elimination, if a cicada population does not match to any known species, it must be new. In addition to the ones from Mexico, I also identified a handful of undescribed species from Central America, the Caribbean, and this brilliant bright blue species from a single mountain in Colombia. Now, I know Colombia is not North America by any stretch of the definition, but the species was simply too beautiful not to illustrate. There are certainly undescribed cicada species throughout the United States as well, but new discoveries here happen less frequently because all of the easy ones have already been noted. One of the more recent discoveries was this species of periodical cicada from Missouri, which looks nearly identical to the more common species, but its emergence period is 13 years instead of 17 years, and it always sings at a slightly higher pitch. We have a very shaky understanding of host plants and evolutionary relationships for most cicadas. The songs of nearly all cicadas outside of the US and Europe have never been documented at all. There is still so much to learn, and anyone with a camera, a microphone, or a sketchbook can easily make new contributions to this field. We live in a golden age of entomology. Oops. All right, now I would like to walk you through the top 10 most common cicadas here in New Jersey to give you some familiarity with the cicadas in our area. If these illustrations look familiar, it's because I have shamelessly stolen all of them from my book. So without further ado, let's dive on in. Number 10 is the pine scissor grinder, a pine specialist. Cicadas in the genus Neotibicin are called dog day cicadas or scissor grinders, depending on who you ask. They emerge during the dog days of summer when the dog star, Sirius, is highest in the night sky. Their calls also sound like someone grinding scissors together in various ways if you use your imagination. And we'll get a chance to hear each of these a little bit later on. Number 9 is the hieroglyphic painted cicada, which is a small species with very complex patterning. Its song is a long, spooling whine that occasionally erupts in a series of quick pulses before falling back again, as though it were struggling to stay awake. Number 8 is the coastal scissor grinder, which is only found in coastal ecosystems from Cape May to Central Florida. It is easily identified by the bright white stripes on its abdomen. It sings with an ambient hum punctuated by periodic trills, kind of like a waterlogged ambulance. Number 7 is the northern black periodical cicada. There are 7 different species of periodical cicadas in total, each of which has a different emergence period and a different pattern on the underside of its abdomen. This species is entirely black and sings with a series of rapid clicks that crescendo into a short buzzy call. Number 6 is the great northern dusk cicada. This is the largest cicada in New Jersey and the second largest in the country. It typically calls around dusk. Its song is loud and abrasive buzz that spools into shorter calls, kind of like a recording of a chainsaw on a skipping record. Number 5 is the spoonwing scissor grinder, which can be identified by the angled edge of its forewings, which is very subtle. This is another good example of a nearly cryptic species. Its song is a chattery rattle that begins and ends with a whine. Number 4 is the lumberjack scissor grinder, so called because its song sounds like a circular saw. Number 3 is the lyre scissor grinder, named by someone who must never have heard a lyre in his life. Its song is better described as a long whine with a distinctive rhythm, like an old bandsaw. Number 2 is the northern pharaoh periodical cicada. The song of the species dips down partway through, like pharaoh, hence its name. This species is absurdly abundant during brood years, but even that is not enough to protect them from habitat loss and the overuse of pesticides. This species was once found throughout most of upstate New York, but it is now extinct in that part of its range. And finally, the number 1 most common species of cicada in New Jersey, the morning scissor grinder, also known as the swamp scissor grinder. This species is synonymous with summer mornings here in New Jersey. It sings with a clattery call that rises and falls like a little air-powered engine. And with that, thank you so much for joining me tonight to talk about a very underappreciated topic. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. All this and so much more is waiting to be discovered in my new book, The Cicadas of North America. The book is the first of its kind and includes over 400 of my own full-color illustrations. And if that sounds interesting, I would also recommend this totally unrelated book on wasps I've heard good things about. We have some time now for Q&A. We also have loaded up some of the calls if anybody's interested in hearing any specific ones. We want to start with that or questions? Calls. Okay, sounds great. Let me see if I can get out of here. I'll leave it to you. A round of applause for the great folks here at Great. And thank you for your patience as we transition. Thank you very much. All right, so since it's the first one up here, we're going to start out with Megatibicin aletes, also called Megatibicin glossa, which is the largest one around here, the dusk singing cicada. Sorry. You turn it down a little bit. These are very, very large, and you can tell by how loud they get. Every year, so we always have them. But they usually sing around dusk. All right, let's see here. All right. Next, let's take a look at the lumberjack scissor grinder. It really does sound like a saw, like something going through. This is the coastal scissor grinder. The one that I said kind of sounds like an ambulance that got flooded with water. Here is Linnaei, which is the spoonbill, or sorry, the spoon wing scissor grinder. You've probably heard this one before. They're annual too, yeah. All of the cicadas here are annual, except for there's a very rare one in northern New Jersey that's synchronous. And then we have 6 different species of periodical cicadas here. Nope, sorry. Only 3 in New Jersey. There's more in Pennsylvania. Yep. Let's see. Talk about that one. Talk about. Here is the morning scissor grinder. This is the most common one. I just love hearing them when I go out in the mornings. Let's see. And you can see I'm skipping through a lot because we do have a lot more around here that aren't as common. This is the hieroglyphic cicada, which is mostly found in the pine barrens around here. It's the one that had like all the patterning on it. This one's much smaller. But it kind of keeps trailing off like it's trying to stay awake. Now let's see. Well, we can check out the periodical ones. See, we also have this will be the last one that we listen to for right now, unless anybody has any specific recommendations. But this is the one of our other common periodical cicadas. Now, usually they're singing when all of the other cicadas are also singing, so it's hard to place this as much. It's usually just a big buzz, but this is what the individuals sound like. All right. So now that I have accosted you with audio, any other questions? Okay, perfect. Either's fine. So it depends on the species. Oh yes, thank you. She asked, or somebody online asked, do the females of any cicadas also sing like the males do? And the answer is, for the most part, no, they don't. The only female cicadas that sing are the ones that are out west that are called wing clickers. And they're this whole group of cicadas that instead of using tymbals to make their sounds, instead they just vibrate their wings together. And because both the males and the females have wings, they're both able to call. So great question. Yes. There are some that sound pretty similar to katydids, and you really have to study all of them to be able to tell the difference. Usually cicadas are more calling during the day, and katydids are mostly calling at night. So that's one way you can differentiate them. Yes. Yeah, so she asked, do cicada killer wasps target the females as well as the males? And the answer is yes. Usually cicada killers and most wasps, as far as we know, are more driven by smell than they are by sight or sound. So they can usually hone in that way. But great question. Yes.
So what's the best way to handle them, and catch them, to identify them? Because when I catch them, it just rattle in my hand and I have to let them go.
So you asked, if you have a cicada in hand, what's the best way to identify it without hurting the cicada? So if you happen to catch a cicada, which if you do, very good job. I struggle with that sometimes too. The best way to avoid hurting it is just to hold it gently on both sides of its thorax. So that way it can't use its wings, it just sort of pinned to its side. And then you can look on the underside, take a picture of the underside, take a picture of the overside, and that's usually enough for identification. But yeah, great question. You have another question.
So if I capture one and put it in a jar or a container, plastic container, will it make a sound in there, or because it's contained it won't?
So you asked, if you capture a cicada in an enclosure, will it sing? And Usually, yes, but it has to kind of reset itself a little bit, so it kind of takes a little bit of time sometimes. It's tricky. It's tricky to figure out what exactly it is that'll get them to sing sometimes. I have not done a lot of that work myself yet, so I can't give you a perfect answer, but that's what I know. Does that help? Does anybody else have any other questions before we go back? Yes. So you asked why would farmers or homeowners want to get rid of cicadas? Is that right? Okay. So because cicadas, when they go to lay their eggs, they do cause that little bit of aesthetic damage to the trees because it causes the twigs to droop and a few of them to die. Some people are very particular about their farms or gardens and want to make sure that doesn't happen. As previously stated, the best way to prevent that is just agricultural netting over anything that you don't want cicadas to get into. That said, there is also, I think, very legitimate reasons that some farmers would not want cicadas to get to their trees if they are trying to plant an orchard and they have young trees. Sometimes it can stunt the tree's growth if there's too many cicadas on it. So I hope that helps to answer your question. They just go after the small twigs, so it shouldn't affect the fruit or the vegetables very much. Yeah, good question. Yes.
It's not a question, it's an anecdote. Dog growth and notice I started to read one and put on a cicada-free diet. Eating because they're wild.
Yeah, that's a great anecdote. She talked about how her dog got very well fed from when the cicadas emerged. And cicadas, as far as we know, there aren't any that are poisonous, but you probably do want to limit your dog's access to them if they're eating too many, just for the sake of their stomachs. Yes, absolutely. So she asked, are there any cultures that eat cicadas? And there are many all around the world. Different human cultures consider many different species of cicadas a delicacy. We can go back. Yes.
The entomologists, the world of entomology studying these to know the population trend, whether it's going up, increasing, being least concern or in danger. Every year to year, is there a way to calculate populations like we do with a lot of species?
So he asked, is there a way that, or rather, how do conservation scientists figure out the population trends of cicadas over time? And the answer is, for the very common ones, there are many scientists who go out and do population studies year after year, or whenever there's a big emergence. I participated in one of those. There's a big emergence in Pennsylvania right now. For the common species, it's pretty easy to do that if you have audio equipment or if you have enough people out in the field. But most cicada species, we have no data for whatsoever. So we have no idea what their populations are doing outside of the fact that they exist. So it's a big, it's all over the board. Yeah. I saw your hand first. Let's go.
Where?
So this year is the Brood 14 emergence. It is happening primarily in Kentucky and Tennessee, but there are some small populations in Long Island, in Cape Cod, and in certain mountains in Pennsylvania. So all the broods are like this. There's like a main spot and then a whole bunch of satellite populations.
Wow.
Something that we cicada scientists have not quite figured out is why on earth these cicadas are emerging in Washington, D.C. right now, because they shouldn't be, but they are. So we have to adjust our models accordingly.
So this might be, my next question might be a political statement.
Okay.
What's the difference between cicadas and locusts?
Uh, I would not consider the difference between cicadas and locusts to be a political question, but the difference is cicadas are true bugs. They belong to the order Hemiptera, and locusts are closely related to grasshoppers and katydids and crickets in the order of Orthoptera. So they're very different parts of the insect family tree. The biggest difference, if you're looking at an insect and you want to tell whether it's a orthopteran, so like a locust, is whether it has very long and angled hind legs, because they use those for jumping. Cicadas don't have that. Cicadas have big front legs for digging.
And I think you mentioned that there was a population in New York State that is extinct.
Yes.
How does a group of cicadas go extinct?
So you asked, how does a group of cicadas go extinct? We are struggling to understand the exact causes of each of these things. In New York, probably the biggest change was just land use being developed for farmland. The extinction happened sometime in the 20th century. We're not exactly sure the details because people weren't studying it as intently as they are now. But there is still one remnant population on the Onondaga Reservation near Syracuse, New York. But all of the other ones out to Rochester and the Finger Lakes, they just don't emerge anymore. So it's probably a combination of habitat loss and pesticide use and just all of the basic, the same things that are affecting insects everywhere.
So when you mentioned a little while ago about certain cultures think of them as a delicacy,
Mhm.
have you ever eaten one and what do they taste like?
So you asked, and I'm repeating just so people online can hear. You asked, have I ever eaten a cicada and what did it taste like? The answer is yes, I have. Back in the brood 10 emergence in 2021, I went out in the backyard and dug some up and fried them with some butter and garlic. They tasted fine. They kind of tasted like earthy and nutty a little bit, with like a hint of vegetable.
You need to try a lot so they can tell the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that. I think people already have actually. I don't need to do that. But yeah, it's fine. You can try it yourself. It won't do any harm. Go ahead.
There's another question online. Cicadas eat once they emerge.
So the question was, do cicadas eat once they emerge? And the answer is yes. Unlike some other insects, like certain types of big moths that don't eat after they emerge, cicadas do, because they retain the same mouth parts through all stages of their life cycle. So after they're out and flying around, they'll go out and they'll find like a tree branch or something like that, and they'll just stick in their rostrum and suck out some sap, and that's what they feed on. What?
Kind of like a lantern fly.
Yeah, very similar. So cicadas and lanternflies are fairly closely related. They're in the same branch of the insect family tree. The difference is lanternflies don't make any sound, and lanternflies also feed above ground for their entire life cycles, while cicadas, most of it's below. I think you can go first.
So the species found in the pine barrens,
Mhm.
has anyone studied to know that maybe they're in the pine barrens only because they live in more acidic soil, they need that soil, or the pine trees for their sap, specific sap, where they can't go out of the delineated area of the pine barrens.
So the question is, do we know why the cicadas in the pine barrens are restricted to the pine barrens? And the answer is probably nobody has studied that yet. But please do, please be the first. We would love to hear. I saw a question up here.
How do they live after they emerge? Like,
Yeah. So once cicadas become adults, they typically live for around a month or so, 2 weeks to a month. Most of their lives is underground. Yeah, great question.
Is there any evidence that they migrate or radiate like range maps? Do they ever change, or is it just kind of like static?
So the question is, do cicadas migrate? Are they migratory? As far as we know, they don't, just because of the specifics of their life cycle. Cicadas, like you mentioned before, we think that each cicada species has a range of soil requirements and host plant requirements that they can't really go outside of. So for the most part, they're stuck to where their host plants are. And because of that, they don't tend to move around that much as adults. Now, that said, sometimes you do get one that gets swept up in a storm or something and ends up 100 miles away from where it's supposed to be, but that's an outlier and not what they typically do.
Is there gonna be a big emergence in New Jersey anytime soon we can look forward to?
So I believe the next big emergence in New Jersey is going to be either 2030 or 2038. So we got a while yet. I can check. There's a page in the book about this. I don't have it memorized. Any other questions? Yes.
Like the data, the land plot,
Yes.
and, okay. My question is, lantern flies are invasive species,
Mhm.
and cicadas are a native species. So if you were educating people about the difference,
Yeah.
how would you emphasize the positive sides of cicadas?
That's a great question. So the question is, how do we emphasize the positives of cicadas when we know that they are similar to lanternflies in a lot of respects? And the best that I can do is just point out that these are beautiful animals that have evolved in this ecosystem for millions and millions of years before we even got here. They are really incredibly important. They form such a large part of the base of a lot of food webs, and they provide ecosystem services to the very plants that they feed on as well, as they dig their little tunnels underground. So lanternflies are beautiful creatures, but we all hate them because they do not fit into the ecosystem. They haven't adapted to live alongside our native species, while cicadas have. So that's my best answer that I can give you. Of course.
So can any of these species we have here actually be invasive that was brought over back in the 1700s from Europe and that they pollinated themselves? And they're so similar to maybe another species over there that they're actually relative.
So the question is, I'm going to boil it down to, are there any invasive cicadas? And the answer is not in North America. Because cicadas have such specific host plant requirements, and because the life cycle that they have makes it hard for them to accidentally get transported from one place to another. So far, knock on wood, we don't have any cicadas from here that have ended up elsewhere or from elsewhere that have ended up here yet. There is at least one species of cicada that was accidentally brought over from China to Japan and is now starting to become established there. But for the most part, cicadas haven't really radiated as much as other species have.
Last question.
Yeah.
So you say host plant,
Mhm.
host trees or shrub and trees, but only woody or herbaceous?
So the question is, can cicada host plants be herbaceous and woody? What are their requirements? And the answer is, it really depends on the species. Like I said, we have over 370 different species here in North America, and all of them have different host plant requirements. Some of them, a lot of the ones around here feed on oaks in addition to some other stuff. A lot of the ones out west, most commonly feed on sagebrush, but there's a ton of diversity where a whole bunch of different cicadas eat basically every plant that you can imagine at different points in their life cycle. And it's also something that hasn't been studied a whole lot, because how do you even go about doing that unless you're very dedicated to that work? So we're still at the cusp of understanding that. And yeah, the answer is there is not a specific host plant requirement for cicadas in general.
My question is about frequency of periodic outbreaks or eruptions.
Uh-huh.
Some people say 7 years, You have a record of how often this happens?
Sure, yeah, so the question is, how often do periodical cicadas emerge? And the answer is there are 4 species that we know of that have a 13-year life cycle of periodical cicadas. And there's 3 species that have a 17-year cycle. But they're all broken up into what we call broods. And a brood is just when you're at a location and they all come out at once. There are, I believe, 15 different broods, which each have a different combination of species in them. So it gets very complicated very quickly. So if you're talking about a specific area, you'd have to check the brood maps to figure out when they're going to merge at what time, because what each individual cicada's lifespan might do, you might have a different emergence in between as well. It's just very complicated, unfortunately. Yes.
Would the 13-year cycle ever meet up with the 17-year cycle?
Yes, absolutely. So the question is, do the 13 and 17-year cycles ever match? And we had that happen just last year, actually. Not here, but in Illinois. There were 2 broods happening at once. The 13-year and the 17-year happened to coincide, which is something that only happens every, I think, 224 years. So it was very loud in Illinois last year, but they survived. All right. Oh, yes, one more question here.
You don't live in.
Of course, of course.
Just wondering back you, and is this an area you've always been really super interested in? Like getting involved with all this and all your expertise and experiences, and just something you've always had a passion for?
So the question is, how on earth did I end up in this field? And I think you hit the nail on the head that ever since I was a little girl, I grew up in an area very similar to this, where there's fields and woods and all sorts of places that I can get into trouble. And insects were always a very accessible part of nature for me. And studying them brings me a lot of joy. So yeah, great question. All right, we have one last question at the back. Is there a website where it's a good place to gather information about cicadas? I recommend this one here is called Insect Singers of North America. This is put together by my colleague, David Marshall. Other than that, I recommend the site iNaturalist, if you've heard of it. It's very easy to go in and select a location and figure out what all of the different cicada species are that have been found there. And of course, I also recommend a certain other resource that might be very useful to you. But yes, great question. All right, and with that, thank you so much.